Good evening. This is the Finance Committee. It's January 31st, 2023. I'd like to call the meeting to order with a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of
the United States of America
and to
to the
the
republic
which is
which
stands
stands
one
one
nation
nation
under
under
God,
God, indivisible,
with
liberty
and justice for all. This meeting is being held remotely in accordance with the Governor of Massachusetts, March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, GLC 30A, Section 20. And on June 16, 2021, Governor Baker signed an act relative to extending certain COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency. This meeting is being recorded. Thank you, everyone, for coming. We're going to continue with budget meetings tonight. And we have the planning board, our IT department, and then Gary will present the highway department budget. So I'm gonna turn this over to Cindy because I'm feeling a little ill tonight, and so she's just gonna lead our budget conversation so I can kind of save my voice for a little bit later. So thank you, everyone, for coming. And Cindy, it might make sense to start off with IT, which is should be a relatively quick budget, so we can get in and out.
Absolutely. Yep.
Thank you. I will
Keith,
let it over for you. Thank
great.
you.
Thank you. Keith, you're up. You're unmuted, so you're good to go.
Okay. I assume you all have the budget there. So in the budget, I had put in for FY24 for wages for 34,310 there, and for expenses as 303,600 for total IT request of 337,910. You'll notice that the town administrator had amended the request that I had submitted and put in an additional 40,000 in the wages category there because he would like to have more time to support the community. So that was the only change from the town administrators, from my request through the town administrator there. So going through the budget, you probably also have the memo that I had sent, which explains what each category is and where the increases are. So the first category was equipment repair. That remained the same from the prior year. And that's, what it suggests if piece of equipment, monitor, keyboard, something breaks, I'm able to repair that. The next category was software maintenance. That did increase by about, let's see, it was 3,000. There was an increase in antivirus costs, antivirus software costs, and another 5,000 increase in switch maintenance, network switch maintenance. So that was a total increase of about $8,000 in that software maintenance line item. Online services, that's our internet, intranet, SD-WAN, so forth. That remained the same from the prior year. Telephone, there was this increase of 3,000. We did put a new phone system in this past year, and we put in some redundant digital connectivity. So that redundancy cost $3,000. So that was the increase in that. Printer copiers, we have on order new printer copiers for all of the town, and they will be approximately an 8,000 increase to provide for the continuing maintenance of those printer copiers. Support services, that remains the same, and additional equipment that remained the same as well. So you can see there was just those 2-3 line items that I mentioned that had the change from the prior year. Are there any questions so far?
No, I don't see any questions.
Okay.
Can I, Cindy?
Yeah.
I don't know if I went. Keith, on the phone system you had mentioned, was that a warrant article last? I know we did we do an upgrade on the phone system?
We did. And I believe that came out of a warrant article, yes.
Was that last fiscal year?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, we just put it in, so
This fiscal year.
this fiscal year,
Oh,
sorry,
okay, fiscal 23, right? Yeah.
23,
Okay.
sorry.
All right. Okay.
So I guess that's basically it for the budget there.
Okay, Karen has her hand up.
You're on mute.
Karen, you're on mute.
Thank you.
There you go.
Thanks, Keith, for that. Could you maybe just describe a little bit more the request to add some more time to the salary line to help support the town? I know the town is really lucky to have someone of quality that you are, and you do a lot for the little dollars that the town charges, and I know that the town's needs keep growing, and I'm sure that's why the town recognizes that needs to be more support. But can you describe just a little bit more of that and what those dollars are for?
Well, the additional dollars is really for just additional hours. Right now, right now it's just myself, and I maintain, all the physical servers. There's 3 physical servers. There's 14 virtual servers. Let's see. Right now there's 8 phone switches. That's part of the new phone system. There's what are called SIP gateways. There's 2 of those, and there's a collaboration server associated with that. That's all your voicemail and apps that it supports and all of that. We have a software-defined wide area network. We have multiple internet connections, firewalls, core switches, edge switches, 28 printers right now, something like 125 plus desktops. We have access points in all the major buildings, and I'm also responsible for a lot of the public safety, assisting with the connectivity of the public safety radios and everything. So just at a high level, that's all of the things that are, that I, contribute to maintaining. In addition to all the, there's multiple databases in different departments that I'm responsible for. So, I mean, any one of those could be a potentially full-time person, and in any real environment, there would be multiple people handling all of those, and I do that on a part-time basis. And technically, I mean, when I'm paid is probably for 11-12 hours a week, and in any one week I'm probably averaging 20-25 hours a week. So Jim asked if I could pick up more, and I said, well, to be fair, I'd like to. I think it'd be reasonable to, to be able to be compensated for the hours that I work before we look at putting in additional hours, which I'm not opposed to. So at some point, I didn't put it in there. He put in the request to increase those hours, so that way I can continue to support the town.
Thank you, Keith. That makes perfect sense to me. Thank you for sharing that information. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Gary?
Yes. So, Keith, on the copiers that we have in town, are those
Yeah.
leased, or are they outright
They're owned.
purchased?
They're owned, and we just purchased new ones. So they're all, I think the current ones we have are probably in the 9-10 year range. which is about the life. I mean, that's pretty much the extent of the life expectancy of any type of copy printer. So we just purchased new ones. I'm expecting them in sometime in February, probably late February. They'll come in, and we're replacing all of them throughout the town.
You're replacing all brand new copies?
Yes, there was a warrant for that, and we got that, and those were ordered.
Okay, 23, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So now, you're talking about like desktops and all that. These desktops are over 5 years old now, or do you have like a routine program where you replace them?
For the printers or desktop computers?
Desktops.
Desktops, those will be replaced. We've procured laptops for town hall annex and a few other departments. I think I had 60 or 65 laptops. Those are going to be desktop replacements. So because we thought, excuse me, when COVID happened, we were all scrambling, doors closed and everything. We thought it would make sense to get laptops. So if we had to continue continuity of operations, people would be able to potentially bring those home and still be able to do work. So we ordered laptops as desktop replacements. So the laptops will come with a docking station, 2 monitors, an external keyboard, mouse, and they just undock it and take it when they would need to.
Yeah, that's a question I was going to have you. That makes perfect sense. I think, in case, who knows what will happen in the future. At least you have the portability to bring equipment home if you don't VPN in or what have you. Two more questions that I had was on the software side. So we obviously have 2 different systems, the school and the town, correct?
Correct. Yes.
So has there ever been like some kind of analysis done that we could be on the same system and we can prevent, maybe duplication of expenses on both the town and the school side, where we're not paying for, 2 financial software packages, 2 payroll packages? Has that ever been looked at?
I think from a software, from a payroll package, I think that has been looked at. I don't know where they've gotten with that. I know they're looking at potential replacements for the accounting software and all of that. They're really looking to go cloud-based, so it becomes easier for, say, the town and the school to be able to, to share that as it becomes cloud-based. So they are looking at those things. I've been on the periphery just to make sure that everything, works in our environment. But for the most part, if something's in the cloud, you just need a web browser and kind of off you go.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And the last question I had was on the internet, the internet aggregation that we're supposed to be having in multiple communities and da. Has there been any more traction on that? Do you feel there's going to be any expenses in the FY24 budget that are going to pertain to that? I mean, I know it was like gung ho. We put all this money into this internet, combining towns. Have you seen anything new on that?
are you talking about the fiber that was run for the town?
No, I'm talking about, how Fairhaven, for instance, had they want to go to pretty much their own cable service.
Yep.
Have we done anything else with that? Because I know there was an article, right, that we.
Yep, and the article was to install fiber optic cable. So the fiber optic cable has been run. It's been installed to all the town buildings and various town sites like the public safety towers and things. So we have fiber run to all of it. As a matter of fact, this week, working to start migrating all of the town equipment over to that new fiber. So at some point within the next, hopefully, month, I'll have all the town equipment moved over to the fiber. I think the school is also working to move their hardware over to the fiber as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Lawrence? You're on mute. There you go.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, kind of following on from Gary's question about the school and the town being on different systems and so on, or different different IT infrastructure. I mean, so just to be clear, we're talking about the school district administration, not the educational portion of the school's IT infrastructure, correct? Because I know that, within the school itself, they do a lot of, there's a lot of educational programs. The kids all have Chromebooks and, this kind of stuff,
Yep.
which, as I understand, was that was achieved through grant funding from educational foundations, and been separate from whatever the school administration side of things might be doing. And Gary, you were referring more to the admin side, right?
Right, the
Yes,
business side,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm concerned, well, I'm not concerned, but the question was, the financials, everything that the town does, and it's like, what does the schools, we know the schools are on a different platform, we know that.
Yeah.
But, I've always been a proponent that there's gotta be some economies of scale between what we do and what the schools do and what we're not doing. I mean, let's face it, we all need to put out the same payroll, we all have to put out the same accounts payable. So I'm just wondering, and I know that, I mean, Keith's right, I think it's been looked at in the past, it's just that I don't know if it's ever been, I don't know if anything has ever been done.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that, because if the educational side is a completely, that's a whole different kettle of fish. But yeah, on the admin side, and the interaction between the school district and the town, yeah, as you say, there should be some economies of scale. Why should we have an IT department, quote unquote, for the school district and another one for the town, when there's so much synergy across those functions, perhaps? So hopefully that's something we can get into when we have the school budget in front of us.
Yeah, and I'm sure if we looked at the IT budget for the schools, it's probably quadruple the amount that we have here in town. And maybe they have more, they got to purchase more Chromebook, and there's more service to that, but still, I think that there's got to be some kind of bridge.
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay.
Any other questions for Keith? I do not see any. Keith, do you have any questions of us?
No, I think that was it. I just hope I explained everything adequately for everybody.
Well, it is amazing to me that, I keep referring to this as a $50 million corporation that we run here in town, and the very few staff people that we have to administer so many things. So if you think about, 300 some employees, $50 million, and we have a technically part-time IT person that oversees most of it. So it's kind of crazy. So thank you very much for all that you've been able to do to keep us up and running.
Yeah, and I guess just one more thing to that, like every time we do like these kind of special projects, like the fiber internet and the phone systems and those kind of things, if the town were to go in and have someone, a consultant, design that or come up with that idea and produce that, I mean, any one of those just concept kind of pieces of work would be, $35,000, $40,000, $50,000. And that I do that as part of my job, essentially. So, this past year there was 3 major projects, that I had coordinated and put together. So, I just mentioned that as well, because, like, for instance, I know for a fact, like when the police station was built, there was a computer consultant that was supposed to come in and design, the police station, and they were just for the design, not for buying equipment or doing labor or anything like that. Just design was like $35,000. So I know those numbers are real and factual. And I ended up doing it myself because I knew I would do a better job. Just as a, in addition to everything else, those specialty projects also, cost quite a bit of money as well. So
Okay, well, thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you very much for what you do. You're welcome to stay, but I think we're going to move on to the planning board.
Thank you.
Jim, you
Okay.
can introduce yourself to some of our new
Sure.
members.
Sure, I'm Jim Whiten. I'm sorry my name doesn't show up on the video.
That's all right.
I don't know how to change that, but
It says Jim. It doesn't have everything, but it has
Does?
Jim. It
It
does
just-
have Jim now, yeah.
on mine it just says you. So
Yeah,
You're
Yeah.
supposed to know who you are. That's why.
right.
that's right,
If you have to be reminded what your name is.
right.
Yeah, no, we got your full name up on the screen in front of me here, so
Okay, good.
I guess everything's good.
So I'm currently the chair of the planning board. And on the call here, we have Michael Burris, who is our new town planner. And I think he's been with us since October. And if you look at our budget for FY '23 versus FY '24, there's a difference in the pay scales of both the assistant planner and the planner, which was presented to the personnel board and the select board the middle of last year, so that we could retain the assistant planner and to hire the new town planner. And so the increase in salary is really only the 2% increase based on what was approved last year. And we did that within our budget last year because we didn't have these folks online for the full year. So everything else on our budget, the expenses is exactly as it was last year, just change the dollar amounts on various items. And I'm going to let Michael tell you what we've been doing. I know that some of you probably do know what we've been up to this past year, but some may not. So, Michael?
Yeah, so for tonight, I've prepared sort of a series of different metrics of projects and other administrative items that we've been involved with since I started in October and then since prior. So these metrics would all be for fiscal year 23. So the department has been involved with 8 approval not requireds, 3 special permits, 5 pre-application consultations. We have applied for or are in the process of applying for 10 different grants. 1 we're in the process for, so we've applied for 9. We have been awarded $121,000 in grant funds through various sources. We right now have $326,000 in requests outstanding. And so, yeah, so that is across three different grants that's outstanding. Then for more long range planning projects, we have, we're actively involved in 7 different projects right now. 3 have been completed. I'll just run through all 10 of those projects very quickly. The 2 projects that are taking up a pretty significant chunk of our time are our rezoning initiative for Route 6, which is being done to complement the planned Route 6 sewer that we're working with our now project manager and the town administrator, as well as the infrastructure oversight committee. Other items that we're currently involved with are MS4 permitting. So this is the municipal separate storm sewer system permit. It's a permit that we have to submit through the EPA. Our housing production plan, we're doing an update to that. We are in the process of going through some zoning revisions. So there's a series of amendments that are going to be presented to town meeting this year. And we're actually having a hearing for that with our planning board next week on Tuesday. We have a handful of expressions of interest to the One Stop program, which is through the Department of Housing and Community Development. These are a couple of different, 3 different grants that we're intending on applying for. I did not mention that earlier just because they're expressions of interest, so we don't actually have any applications in the mix. When we get results for that or get feedback on those expressions of interest, we'll be submitting them. Probably whittle it down to 2, I would anticipate. Then we have a water to the harbor community in the south end of Westport. We're involved in a regional transportation plan. We've participated in some of the Route 6 Complete Streets initiative through SERPED, which is a plan to make recommendations to MassDOT for how to envision what the Route 6 corridor, the transportation corridor will look like in the future. And then Amy has taken the initiative to start making sure that our sureties are being closed out. So making sure that she's doing follow-up with some of our local developers and solar companies and whatnot to make sure that they're completing their projects. We're getting inspections and those sureties are being closed out. And so between Amy, Nadine, and I, we staff the Climate Resilience Committee. So for this fiscal year, there's been 3 of those meetings. And then for the planning board, there's approximately 21 meetings a year for that. And one last thing I forgot to mention, I just want to talk a little bit about our solar projects. So last fiscal year, the office did approve one solar project. There's been 4 that have received extensions over the past year due to COVID-related supply chain issues. And as part of those extensions, we've requested that they add additional surety onto their projects to ensure that the things that the improvements that they promised would be installed correctly. So that's an overview of what the department has accomplished in the last year. And I think would be happy to take any questions if you all have any.
Gary.
Yes, Jim.
Yep.
So where are we? I know that the master plan, has that been relooked at or implemented? I mean, where
Yeah.
are we?
Yes.
Steps
So
of that?
we are obligated for the town to do one every 10 years. We finished one 2016, I believe.
Okay.
And last year or in the 21-22 area, we did a 5-year update, which we're not required to do. And that really is a pretty good document. You can go through it and you can see what has been accomplished since the 10-year plan was out and what still needs to be done, and also what new items pop up that we need to do. So we're trying to keep it as a live document.
Mm. Yeah, it's a moving target. I mean, it's not, I don't want to say moving target, but it's, yeah,
It
yeah,
is. It's always a
Yeah.
moving target. So.
yeah. So, and I know that, as Michael had mentioned on the solar arrays, we've
Yep.
got a couple, I guess, a couple new ones, and then one proposed. I mean, so that's good. I mean, you know, there's obviously a lot of land in Westport. Not that we want to fill them all with windmills and solar, but whenever we can take the opportunity to do that, I think that's a good revenue generator for the town.
I believe it is, Gary. I think when all of these solar systems are done, so I think we have 5 that are still to be complete. We would be generating more electricity than the town as a whole uses.
Wow.
So that's really good for climate change and to be doing our part. We have over the years reduced the size that they can be by reducing the amount of acreage that can be cleared or cleared, let's say. Well, I think that worked out well too. I mean, so I don't think we're getting as many as we used to because we've reduced the size that they can be. But still, it gives, number one, landowners, something to do with their land that they can lease out, and not put houses on.
Yeah, and you know, I commend the planning board for a piece of this to say that, you know, you're not seeing these glaring you know, acres of panels on a side of a highway. I think they're hidden. I think the permitting process is pretty well thought out. Where, you know, and I think that's a big thing when people are worried about solar panels in their neighborhood. They don't want to be staring at them. So
Right.
And all the ones, I think the arrays that we've seen have been out of sight. So I think that's really good.
I agree. I think that is. I think it's good.
Thank you.
You have a question?
Yes, I do. Those different subject though, Jim.
Yep.
We have heard a good deal recently about the nitrogen attack by the DEP, et cetera. I think everyone agrees the 5-year thing was simply a threat and not expected. But so far, to me, the idea of quote community plan what is an enigma wrapped in a riddle, as Churchill said. What is it, and what is it supposed to be? What are the
It's
the Tom take on, you know, what does it mean?
it's a big mess. I am sure I went and testified at the big public hearing in Dartmouth, the week before. There were about 200 people there, and not anybody spoke highly of DEP. I believe what happened is Conservation Law Foundation has filed a suit against DEP for failing to follow the law, Massachusetts law, which prohibits the continued putting nitrogen or any other contaminant in the state's waters, being the estuaries. And so the 5-year plan to have everybody put a septic system in that would denitrify or reduce nitrogen. I'm assuming that we have 6,000 or 7,000 septic systems in Westport. And to do that within a 5-year time period, number one, it would cost a minimum of $140 million for the homeowners in Westport. Number two, there's no way on this earth that we could have the Board of Health hear presentations of 7,000 different septic systems within 5 years. And so I think this is really sort of a blackmail to get everybody stirred up to force the town to accept going for a 20-year plan. And Hugh, we're actually doing that stuff now anyway. That's what part of this sewer is. And part of what the Board of Health requires for new construction with denitrifying systems. And we need to look at, we're doing the MS4 stuff. That's a big part of the contribution for nitrogen is stormwater. And we're doing all the things, and we've been doing it for 15 to 20 years on trying to plan on what to do and how to do it. And DEP has really been no help at all.
That seems to be the general feeling.
Yes. And so even, I worked with Paul Schmidt for years with others to try to get some legislation that would require DEP to call estuaries like ours a nitrogen impaired embayment, which is a different category for Title V, which would require just a little bit more land per bedroom, which is minuscule change, but it was, part of one change that we could have done. And we got this kind of legislation proposed by Paul in 3 different legislative sessions. So that's 6 years. In the final year, it got through several committees and was in public hearing. And I went and testified in Boston, as well as everybody else from down here that was involved in this. And Mass Audubon and Buzzards Bay and everybody testified. And then after we were done, the head of DEP got up and testified and killed it and said that, no, we don't need it. We're working on this ourselves. And that was 8 years ago. So nothing's happened. Part of the problem where we are is the failure of DEP to do anything about this until now, because they're being sued by conservation law founders. So what we have given letters of to DEP as comments before they institute regulations is to say, this really does not make sense. Number one, you're never going to enforce the 5-year plan. How would you propose to do that anyway? Send the state police to your house and say, you got to stop using your toilet? I mean, there's no way that they could do that. And secondly, for the 20-year plan, they want as a metric how much you have to reduce it by using other means is by 75% of the total septic load from nitrogen in the town. And that is not borne out by science. I mean, we already have a TMDL that shows that we're about 18% over in the East Branch. Right now, we're about okay in the West Branch. So, the metric should be that we get our numbers down below the TMDL. And it should be that. It shouldn't be some metric that says 75% reduction on the septic load. How are they going to measure that?
Mm-hmm. But it also sounds like that's the making of a lawsuit, arbitrary and capricious. That there is a standard that is not being consistent with. But thank you. Wait, go ahead.
The other thing is that this is an unfunded mandate. And I think we could prove that. I mean, and then, so somebody has filed some legislation that would say they can't implement this unless they're going to pay for it themselves, unless DEP is going to pay for it. And if it goes with a 5-year plan, the DEP should pay for everybody's upgrade.
Right.
Good luck with that.
Right. Counterattack is always useful.
That's right.
Thank you.
You're muted, Cindy.
That time I was the one on mute. Sorry. Lawrence, go ahead. Sorry.
Thanks. Yeah, this was a sorry, I just hit the wrong button again. Michael, this was a question for you. You mentioned something about 3 expressions of interest in the one-stop program. Could you clarify for the newbie here what that is?
Yeah, so the one-step program is what the Department of Housing and Community Development, it's basically they take all of their grant programs and accept applications at one time for various different grant programs. So for example, one grant that we're looking into is doing a feasibility study for the high school to renovate it into a mixed or a multi-use facility that can have town offices and maybe senior housing. Another project is for Route 6, the sewer through the MassWorks program. And then another one we have is looking at the main road corridor in the Central Village area and seeing what kind of streetscape improvements we can do in that corridor. that would be complementary to the business community and the residences that live in that area. So it really runs the gamut, but it's their quote unquote one-stop shop for all of those programs.
Jim, I had a question. Will you have any articles on the zoning change articles on the warrant this year?
Yes. Basically two, it could show up as three because of change of definitions, but we have two. Michael, you can give us an update on what those are?
Yeah, so broadly considered, one is a change to well, actually, the most involved one is some minor changes to our solar bylaws. So it's really just tinkering with some of the language in there, such as allowing the planning board to require decommissioning sureties for all projects instead of just on municipal property as it's written. So just kind of small changes of language like that. And then another one, this came from the ZBA as a suggestion, is to change ownership, the ownership definition for accessory dwelling units or accessory apartments as it's referred to in the zoning bylaws. And that is to, their interest is to make sure that the owners of those accessory apartments are either the owners of or they're the owners of record on the deed, or that they are representing a 25% stake of an LLC who owns that property. So those are the main two changes. And then another one is it's just a definitional change. There was a typo in one of our definitions.
Okay, you had another question?
I do. As far as Central Village is concerned, I'm sure you were aware, at least I know Jim is aware, the last time there was a thought about rearranging things in Central Village, it sank without a trace. And I'd be pretty cautious about that. And as far as the high school is concerned, I think you need to involve other people along the way because there are very different opinions as to what should happen. You may find yourself, if you got a grant, being shot down nonetheless because people were not in favor of whatever the grant's going to pay for.
Sure. Yeah, the long-term building committee, they put together well, I helped them draft the expression of interest. I'm not really involved with the discussions that have ensued about that project. So yeah, but
Call it more an idea because I think you said it get too far down the road before the guns start coming out about it.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and I believe that there's going to be from talking to, so I think Jim Hartnett staffs that commission. And I believe there's going to be a non-binding vote on what the town thinks there should
be. Not at all clear because everyone has said there's no way you can have a referendum that makes any sense when something is in midair.
Sure.
A lot of people think that would be a waste of time.
Yeah.
I believe now, you just interject there, I believe now it's going to be placed on the town warrant. So there will be opportunity for discussion rather than put it as a one-dimensional question on a ballot, that they're going to put it in as a question on the warrant for open discussion. So we'll see if that makes it a little bit more understandable, but we'll see.
Better of a discussion at town meeting.
Yeah.
Sure.
Any other questions for members of the planning board? I see none. Thank you very much for your time, gentlemen. You're welcome to stay. I believe, Gary, you're going to talk about the highway budget?
Yes. So Chris Gonzalez couldn't make it this evening, so I told him I'd present the budget on his behalf. So if I can present the
can you put it up on the screen?
Yeah, okay, let's see. Okay, can everybody see this?
Yes.
Okay, so, his budget as per the request from the, town administrator, to every other department has been, level funded, level services. He presented a budget here. Nothing really has changed. I mean, if you look at every single one of the line items, they're going up very minor. This is what we're seeing across town. The big thing with the highway department is, the labor and, they've got equipment and they've got, there's really no need for equipment. Well, there is a need for equipment, but, they make work what they have. So, their issue is the labor. They're only down to like 8 guys, guys and, and guys and gals that run the department. But, it's getting more and more difficult every single year for them to perform their duties. And I'm not just talking about cutting grass. I'm talking about, plowing roads, salting the roads, you name it. It's, in the past, we've seen it, and I know I've seen it in my area, that roads wouldn't get plowed for 3-4 hours. So, it's an issue. We know it's an issue, and it's been an issue for a long time. So, far from just the contractual increases in the budget, this is really what they've got. It's not much. And he's talked to Jim about this, and there's really where there's. I mean, my questions were to when I met with him this week. Last week with Chris was, how about your utility costs, like fuel, oil? How does that look? Gas, diesel still being at $5 a gallon, and most of their equipment is being run with diesel. He seems to think that he's going to be okay. It's hard to tell. I think we'd have to look at an expense report from Nicole to see how far along they are with their expense. They've blown through half the budget, a quarter of the budget, 3/4 of the budget already, or the whole budget. We don't know until we look at that. I don't know if somebody already has looked at that, but it's difficult. It's getting more and more difficult for this department to continue to operate. Under normal circumstances. Forget about a skeleton crew. And we talked about this too. They've got issues where they can't hire. They're having a hard time hiring people. People will come into the town. They'll see what other towns are making. They'll be trained here. They move on. So that's a big. Not only in other departments, it's big in highway too. And I can put up another slide that I have here that I'd like to have people look at. Let me see. Try to put up another one. I'm having a hard time putting it on the screen here. I don't know. At the budget, but it was a file where I wanted to show in-kind services. Okay, wait a minute. Maybe I got it right here. No, I don't have it. I'm having a little difficulty.
Got it.
No, that's not. No, that doesn't work. And I wanted to share a document that he gave me. Here we go. Right, I've got it. Okay. So this document here is what the can anybody see that?
Yeah, can you make it a little bigger?
Yeah, you just have to expand it a little bit there.
Let me see. Is that better?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you go through this document, you see what the highway department does in the course of a year or whatever, and how they support other departments. And this is what's at risk. And I thought that this was a very, an eye-opener for not only us on the finance committee, but for residents. For instance, what they do for the police department, they maintain the grounds. We can go on and read every single one of these. Maintain it in the wintertime. Same thing with the fire department. Same kind of duties. And this list goes on and on. School department, repair department vehicles. So in a department that's required to maintain roads, which I think is their main function, they're asked to do all these other duties, and with a complement of 8 people, it's very, very difficult. Library, this is Council on Aging, this just goes on and on. So this is a key, I think this is key to see, because I think the residents really need to know that these items may be at risk. Digging the graves at the cemetery, street signage, so it's important. It's very, very important to know this. And this is what we get back to when we talk about an override. It's not because we want to put fancy new equipment, park brand new trucks at a garage. It's because we don't have the staff to continue on with what the residents really need, in this town. And, it's crazy. If the first thing you see when you go in that office of theirs is a picture. It's like circa 1970 or 1980. And it's a picture of 10 brand new vehicles sitting right there. And there's about 15 to 16 workers, highway workers, in front of those equipments. That's 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And we have less employees now in that department and less equipment. So
We still have the same truck.
Right.
done, it's mind-boggling how they get it done. That's an eye-opener, if anybody ever saw that picture. So that's it. If anybody has any particular questions on the budget itself, I can try to answer them.
Karen,
I
you have-
just said it's unfair because I did replace the truck a while ago.
Yeah, well, the chassis blew out, so it's got a picture of that on his wall too.
Karen, you had your hand up.
I do. Thank you. Gary, thanks for presenting the budget tonight. So I wanted to just to try to dive down a little bit more into the salary line for a
Yes.
second and positions. And I know what you just said is true. 20, 30 years ago, there were 20 or so highway workers, and now there's far less than that. So I thought there weren't even as many as 8, as you say, but maybe some are seasonal. But what I was trying to understand is, so how many full-time people are there now, and how many does Chris feel that he needs to be able to maintain
Okay.
the services that he's providing?
Can I
How many
share?
positions? Yeah,
Yeah. Can I share another? I'm going to try to share
Yep.
this other screen with you, and it's got the head count. So
I think you've got it. So if you make it a little
okay.
bigger, that would be helpful.
Yeah. So let's see. Wait a minute. Let me go back to this, and let's see. It doesn't have names, but it gives you a history of what the budget, what the budgets were for personnel, how many employees. You see a gap in here because Chris wasn't able to fill in that data. But if you look back in, 2005, they had 13 people. Now they have 8.9, let's say nine employees. Almost, a reduction of whatever. So these are full-time employees. So he's got a clerk, he's got his clerk that, maintains the budget, maintains the day-to-day operations in the office, while Chris, the department head, is out in the field working with the crew. So the other 6.9, let's say 5-6 people, are actually laborers. So those are the guys in the trucks, sanding, plowing, cutting grass, and all those other duties that you saw on the screen, and then some, because they're maintaining the roads also. So what he would like to see is, they talked about like an additional $200,000 in their budget, and that would be able to square them away with what they have to do. they would be able to hire the foreman. There's been a foreman position forever. Take it out, put it in, take it out. This is how it's been for the last 5 years, 6 years I can remember. They haven't been able to fill that. So they really don't have anybody under Chris. Chris is like, it's Chris and then the laborers. So, he seems to think, and talking to April, that an additional 200,000, if not a little bit more, would swing it and be able to have them be back to some, I'm saying normal. I mean, not that normal is good with 10 people. You got to think Westport is a big town, land-wise. And don't forget, all these, so 05, if we look back at 05 and we trend through these years, how many more, excuse me, how many more developments have come in? How many more of those streets have we accepted with the same number, if not less, employees? So that's a burden on an department. I don't get how you slice it.
Yeah, and that's what I'm trying to kind of bring out on this, because even if it's the same number of employees, you're right. Westport has grown, and there's more miles of road, there's more miles of everything, and so the demands get greater.
Yes.
And residents have expectations that when it snows, the roads will get plowed. When there's a pothole, it'll get filled. And when there's a tree that falls and blocks the road, that someone will come and take care of it. And we all want those expectations, right? I want that to happen too, for my own living in a town, if it's my road, and to be able to go somewhere. But what I'm trying to get to is we all need to understand that those services, with the number of employees that we have, gets harder and harder every year. And the expectation that the town's going to be able to do all of those services instantaneously needs to be, we need a reset here, because that's just not the reality of the town, right?
Yeah.
So unless the town pursues an override and allows for the staffing levels to be at levels where then the department can in fact provide those services, there is going to be a detriment to that service. And so we either have to accept things as they are and not be fully funded, and don't expect services to be done instantaneously, or then you support an override to really increase the dollars to this department that you can provide services. So it's important to understand this, that they're at minimum levels here.
Right, they operate as triage.
They're just
So-
right. It's triage, and any emergency then can't be handled. Or if someone like Chris, as you say, who's doesn't have a second person in line, if something happens to him, then that makes it all the harder to manage the department. Or if one or two people get leave and don't, come back, it's hard to manage such a small department when there's such a big volume of things to be done. So
Yeah.
it's just it's expectations is what I was trying to get to. So thank you for sharing this.
Yeah, and really think about it. From the tip of Davis Road to Horse Neck Beach, all the miles of road that are in between. It's hundreds and hundreds of miles of road. And you see a truck from the highway department on Davis Road. 2 hours later or an hour later, you see that same truck down at Horse Neck Beach. So, I mean, not only are we burning out equipment, we don't even talk about that, but we're burning out our staff. And that's something we got to be really cognizant of. And like I said, they're not looking for new equipment. They're not looking for shiny trucks with chrome bumpers. That's not what they're looking for. They're looking for boots on the ground. They need people, to run this department. And it's unfortunate, but hopefully we can figure this out.
Lawrence, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I think we all know, what an uphill battle it would be to try to get an override passed in this town, particularly. I go back to what you were showing a minute ago there, Gary, with that sort of bullet list of, let's call it additional duties that the highway department's doing, like cutting grass at the library and things like this. Has there been any kind of an analysis done to show the percentage of resource that is deployed, time, personnel on those kinds of activities versus, paving roads, filling potholes, clearing down trees, that kind of stuff. So, have we got an analysis of how their time is being spent and what it's being spent on? So, maybe we can look at prioritization or appropriate deployment of resources before we go charging to the conclusion of trying to push through for an override.
Well, I mean, I can't speak on that, with 100% accuracy, but I know that in the past when I've talked to the highway department, even at these levels of 8.9, 10, 9, you see on the list there, all those duties that are on that list are not like, they're not duties that, okay, if they get extra time, they do it. That's part of their daily routine. So if they got a crew that goes out in the morning, they're gonna go cut the grass at let's say the Macomber, and then they're gonna go do the high school, then they're gonna, so I think they've got a process.
I guess what I'm asking is that actually part of their job description or part of their department charter? Or is this something that they've just kind of through tradition or other ways started doing? And to me,
Well, I mean,
highway department's primary focus is to take care of the roads.
Yeah, I mean, absent anyone else doing those other duties, you'll have grass that's 6 foot high at the library. I mean, because there's really there's no other person or no other department that's going to pick up those duties. So you're right. Maybe along the history of the town, they've maybe morphed into a department that really they shouldn't be right now. But I think that it's just that the duties have gone nowhere else, and there'll be an issue if we don't do the duties that are on that list. So who does them? I mean, I don't know in the scheme of things, but I know they're doing them. So
yeah, I guess the root of my question is, should they be doing them? Or should the library, or I'm just using it as an example, not that I have anything against the library. But yeah, for things like that, is it maybe somebody else's responsibility more logically to be mowing grass, spreading salt on private parking lots, whatever. I don't know. I'm just, we have the situation that we have, right? The number of employees is down. We know money's tight. We know resources are tight. We know it would be an uphill battle to get an override passed. I just wonder, are we looking at every possible angle on this to, make the best use of the resources and the financial and personnel that we have, in the current conditions, in the tough conditions that we face.
Well, as an example to that, just quickly, some towns have their own school maintenance facility, if you will. But with that comes a price. I mean, now you have to buy equipment for the schools and da. But I think that our highway department is all encompassing. So they're doing all the parking lots in schools and all that. So are we getting a bang for the buck? Yes. But are we also burning that department out at the same time? Absolutely.
Right, because in fact, if we separated them and said, okay, now each department is going to have to farm out those duties, to private contractors. So now the library's got a new line item in their budget. The Council on Aging has a new line item. The police and the fire are going to have to add money to their budget to include all of those things. So collectively, maybe it's $100,000. Well, the highway department would be much happier taking that $100,000 and saying, well, let us manage that. And, they're not cutting grass in the winter, but that same person could be used doing something else. So whether the highway department does it or someone else does it, it's still going to be an expense. And it's still things that have to be done. And whether we pay an outside source or an inside source, as Gary said, we're getting a good bang for the buck.
Yeah.
We just need a little bit more people to be able to do the job well. I mean, back in the day, the highway surveyor, Russell Hart was not out there on the road with a shovel filling potholes on the back of the truck.
No, absolutely not.
Chris is. I mean, Chris
Yes.
rides the trucks. He's out there working side by side with these guys,
Absolutely.
doing the job. Prior highway surveyors, absolutely not. Their job was to oversee the operation and go out and survey what needed to be done. So, I mean, we are getting a tremendous bang for the buck in the resources that we're able to squeeze out of a department that is being very, very tightly managed. I mean, as best they can. It's amazing that they can do what they do.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Well,
Jim-
that's a good point, Cindy, you know, and I
Yeah.
think that really needs to be included in the narrative, in the discussion around this. You know, particularly when we go into town meeting and we're asking for more money.
Right.
I think it's very, you know, and that's why I was asking the question, you know, is
Yeah.
is there an analysis that shows where these folks are spending their time, how they're spending their time, to, you know, to illustrate that, and, you know, to the points that you both have made so eloquently.
Right. So, I mean, it is somewhat of a misnomer that they're called the highway department, because truly it is almost like a Department of Public Works because of that list that you provided, that they do provide so much more than just maintaining the roads. They're, you know, doing all of these other things for municipal properties in general. So it's really important. Jim Whiten, you had a question.
Yeah, I'm sorry to butt in, but
That's all right.
I am a citizen. It's an open meeting. I think that the highway department has been sorely underfunded for decades now. And when I spoke with Chris in the summertime, I think he was down to 3 laborers, or what you would consider laborers. So I'm not sure about that 8.9 figure. Secondly, as we discussed for the 20-year plan to get rid of nitrogen, or get it under control in the town, part of that effort will be stormwater. And we need to do more. We hardly have any really sophisticated stormwater controls or any filtration of stormwater before it goes into the brooks and right into the river. And that's going to be part of the plan, a 20-year plan. So we're going to need a more robust highway department.
Yeah, Jim makes a good point. The 8.9 is a moving number because some people will be out, you know, on medical leave, some people, you know, but those are the positions that he has. He may not have full complement throughout the whole year, you know. So, yeah, I think that every department that comes in front of us, and I know that when I was chair and Karen was vice chair, we kind of try to push this to departments. And I think this is a good start. I think the highway department, this list of things that will not happen or that happen and may not happen, needs to be done by every single department, because people really need to see that, okay, you may not get your street plowed at a timely basis, which means, okay, you can't get a fire truck down there, you can't get an ambulance down there. This is the reality of it. So, you know, nobody wants to raise taxes, but at the same time, there's public safety that's involved in it. And
Well,
highway department is a big piece of this.
Gary, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I think these department heads have to be their own advocates, particularly at town meeting, to indicate, you know, what some of the losses will be if we continually keep stripping these budgets down or holding them to bare minimums. The department heads have to have the opportunity to get up and say, well, these are the things we do, and these are the things that can no longer be done or won't be done in the future as a result of that. And you can go through department by department, and everyone has a similar story, whether it be the building inspector or the cemetery department or certainly the highway department. They need to be given that opportunity to explain to the townspeople how difficult their job is, because no one really sees that. I mean, they just see either that their road doesn't get plowed or the pothole doesn't get filled, and they get angry about it, and the squeaky wheel gets the oil, and somebody comes by and fixes it, and they go, oh yeah, see, I called and somebody came and fixed it. Well, they fixed it because they care, but it's, as I said earlier, it's triage. I mean, they can only attend to those things that are the most important until something else happens. So it's,
I think
department heads need to have a voice in indicating what the problems are.
Yeah, and I think it's part of the budget process coming from the town administrator and then ultimately from the Board of Selectmen. if in fact they want to push this override or they don't, they need to give this directive to the departments to say, listen, in writing, we need to have this in writing. Do exactly what you see with like, not an example, but like exactly what the highway department did. That directive has to come from the Board of Selectmen. If they're serious about getting this passed and they're serious about moving this needle, because if that doesn't happen, we're spinning our wheels, and it's unfortunate because ultimately the departments are the one that suffer and then the residents. So it's got to come from the top. And if there's no ambition there to do that, then, why do we keep talking about an override? That's my opinion,
Lawrence, you had a comment?
Yeah, just to build on what you both are saying, I would say, it's not only important that they have a voice. I think it's part and parcel requirement of the job that they should be providing to the residents. I don't want to say justification, but an explanation, clarification of how the money is being spent. I mean, how can we expect the voters to make an intelligent, informed decision about override or not? The override. Let's not even forget the override question at all. Just on a normal day-to-day, year-to-year budgeting process. Well, what are you spending your time on? What are you spending your budget on? What would be the consequences of an increase or a decrease? The voters need to know what bang are we getting for our bucks. That's the only way that I think anyone can make any sort of an intelligent decision, whether it's us or the voters at large.
You had a comment?
Last year, we went through that approach for town
Right.
meeting. And the answer from the schools were we need 42 new positions and an increase in the budget of 3.5 million. The budget at the moment for schools it looks like $1 million plus in the red. If the school's not on board, we are wasting our time. So I agree with everything that's being said about the highway department, et cetera. And Lawrence, I think the idea of analyzing what they do is rearranging the deck chairs, because you don't have money for the other people to pick up what's being done. It's either a question of not doing it all, which is always an option, or it's struggling as best we have. But our discussion about an override is a waste of time unless the schools are on board.
Yep.
Sad as that is.
Yep.
Well, I go back to my prior comment. It needs to stop from the top. And it needs to come from the select board. That's where this conversation has to begin. And we talked about this last year. We talked about this. We were going to have a summit and we were going to get together and we were going to talk about this. But we're talking about it. I mean, we're doing as much as we can. But I think it just dies out.
Gary, I repeat what I just said a minute ago about the response of the schools.
Right. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it. I agree financially with what you're saying, Hugh. But again, if the town voters don't get it, then it's over.
The town meeting is basically controlled by the parents of the school system, and they will vote for the school budget, whatever the school wants. And if the school community is on board, nobody else is going to make a difference.
Well, I would have to respectfully disagree with that assessment
right.
of the town meeting. That's not my perception at all.
That's not been the experience, so I hope you're right.
Yeah, it's an incredibly democratic process that unfortunately can be stacked heavily, and you never know what audience is going to be in front of you. So sometimes it's pro school, sometimes it's not, but it's unfortunate the way the difference can go based on just a few extra voters in a room. So it's
that's exactly my point, and that's why I say that across the board, the departments have to make their case, pitch their pitch.
Yeah.
Because you're absolutely right. Whatever hot topic is on the warrant that year is how the audience is going to get stacked.
Right.
I know from my own experience of campaigning for the new school, the amount of effort that was put into that in order to get, the right people
Votes,
in the
right.
room where it happens, quote Hamilton. And that's the problem, right? Is how do you get that kind of enthusiasm for the business as usual stuff? How do you get that kind of engagement when it's the highway department budget or the council on aging budget or whatever, right?
It's hard. It's hard. Karen, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thanks. Following the spirit of the conversation, I agree with, a lot of what was said. I don't know logistically even how possible it is for town departments to actually make presentations at town meeting. And even if that were to happen, how quickly a resident sitting in the audience with not having paid attention to something, the budget would absorb it all in an hour anyway. So, so much of the education to the residents has to be prior to town meeting. So sitting in that auditorium, hearing the budget, it's just not going to absorb at that point where someone's going to take an hour and go. So part of what we do as the finance committee is exactly this, where, I can't say we're the most watched TV and people are going to sit here and listen to a 2-hour meeting of ours to understand the budgets, but this is our job, right? So our job is to review the budgets and make a recommendation at town meeting. And our job, in my opinion, is not just to present the budget, but it's also to present a form of analysis of what that budget is. And so part of for us is we need to do some sort of presentation along with the numbers that kind of describes these sort of things that each department is lacking. Clearly, it's important to be driven by the department itself, and they need to be advocates for themselves. But I think we also hold a responsibility with the recommendation that we make to help provide whatever information we can, that we're not just presenting, here's the budget, and people don't know what we go through to review the budgets. And, Lawrence, you're asking great questions about, have we done this analysis? Does this make sense? And many of it has been done. And so, but we need some sort of educational framework that then supports those numbers, that what we've done, and support from the department themselves as well. And so, last year I put together a pretty meaty presentation of understanding municipal finance and how it relates to Westport. But, maybe this year we continue along with that, but then kind of frame in something else of what are the needs of the departments that aren't being filled, sort of put together just like Gary presented with the highway department. Here's all the things that the highway does. Here's in a summary form that's digestible. And, maybe that's something working with the town departments to kind of put exactly that together in a memo framework that helps explain things to the town. And
Right,
that
you
needs
could
to go out in advance, because it's at town meeting, it's just too much to digest.
Right, you could kind of frame it in the format of, did you know? Did you
Right.
know the highway department also does blah, 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 blah?
Right.
Did you know the building inspector did X number of inspections?
Right.
Did you know the fire department responds to 10 calls a day on average,
Yeah.
Did
I
you
mean-
know all of these things? And yeah,
I mean, I'm a CPA and I've been doing finance for 30 some years. And when I went to my first town meeting, when we moved here to Westport, and I saw the budget for the first time presented at town meeting, I was overwhelmed by it and went, oh my God, I can't possibly absorb this. And it's my profession, right? And so I can't absorb something in an hour. And I couldn't even begin to ask the questions at town meeting to
Yeah.
get answers to do that. And so, the time and place is not then, the time and place is far before that. And that's what we kind of need to recognize. And we did a great job last year doing that. And so we as a committee need to do exactly what we're all talking about and kind of help that educational process and create the next thing that helps let our residents know where things are.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that the town does not have a good common platform that people use. You know, it's bits and pieces here and there. Not everyone uses the town website. Not everyone relies on that to get information from there. Certainly not everyone watches the YouTube presentations of the meetings. Some people subscribe to Shorelines, many people don't. They have 1,500 subscribers. There are, 18,000 people in town. So, so Shorelines has limited, so then there's Facebook, and Facebook just in of itself ends up getting a very distorted and warped viewpoint based on the views of some people that try to be overpowering in a much more negative sense. Yes, there are positive people on there, but it just goes down the wrong path. So what do you have left? You've got a Fall River newspaper, you've got a New Bedford newspaper. Some people subscribe to that, some people subscribe to one or the other, and some subscribe to nothing at all. We really don't have a local voice here in town as a good way to disseminate information equally around town. And that's really a shame. Lawrence, I'm sorry, you've had your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know what to say now. Karen, you guys have all made such great points, and I was thinking a minute ago about the skewing of the town meeting audience and how expecting people to try and grasp a complex, complicated, nuanced subject when they show up to town meeting and read the warrant for the first time, you've missed the boat if you're pinning your hopes on that. And on the other hand, let's remember back to the day, whenever it was, prior pandemic. I mean, my brain now is like, before COVID, after COVID. But that year when there was the big stink about the animal registry, right? And how that hall was packed out. And as soon as that article on the warrant was dealt with, boom, it was ghost town, and then we're there until 11 o'clock at night, plodding through article after article about changing the status of this street from private to public, So part of it is a communication and understanding. Part of it is, what is the purpose? Why are we even here? And I think, Karen, you're absolutely right. We as a finance committee, we should be looking at, what can we do to put these things in context prior to the event, so that people understand. Because as you say, Cindy, you're absolutely right. The social media incentivizes the negativity and incentivizes engagement through outrage, and so the loudest voice gets the most airtime. It's hard to be that loudest voice in the room when you have something positive or nuanced to say. So yeah, I don't have an answer right now, even though I'm a marketing guy by profession.
Right.
But I think we're raising some really good points.
Last year, Karen had even put together a video in advance of town meeting, going through, what a structural deficit is, and how we got here and what the problems were. We have no idea, how many views it got or whether it helped or not. But anyway, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I think we're going in circles. Can we
Right.
move on to something else, or just the
Yeah.
end of the agenda?
Call the question, right? Let's call the question. You can be Mr. Gillespie. We'll call the question. We'll move on. I guess that kind of covers our override discussion to some degree. We'll see after we have what do we have? Schools and police next week? Does that wrap it up?
Well, we have the school next week. The police is to be scheduled. I don't know what the,
I talked to Keith, well, I'll talk to him later next week and see, because the issue has to do with arbitration, which is
Right.
where the budget is. And until that's settled, doesn't really make sense to talk about a budget, because the bigger piece is in midair.
does he have any idea when it might be settled, Hugh?
He didn't when I talked to him today, but I was gonna touch
Well,
base later in the
met with
week to find out more.
I met with the town administrator yesterday on some personnel board matters, and that subject came up. So they have received the finding, but now they can file a brief, an appeals brief. So the arbitrator has come back, but there is a process that the police have evidently initiated to file a brief. So Jim did not think that was going to take very long, because by nature of binding arbitration, that should be final. So they can at least make their statement as to how they feel about the outcome. So I think it's imminent.
Okay, because if it's imminent, we can wait. If
Yeah.
it's potentially, 2-3 months down the road, then
I think it's very close.
we need to call it, and they need to come in and present at least the status of where it's at. So
Yeah.
again, back to the, trying to put together presentation materials, the sooner we can finalize the budget means the sooner we can start to work on those things,
Right.
So anyway, so thank you. And then, so school schedule for next week, and then that's it
Okay.
for budgets.
I would comment, I think the state budget still has not done anything, but I'm not sure about that.
Right, we're on hold, just in terms of the select board would be scheduled to finalize their budget recommendation to us by February 20th, so that will come. Some of the big items that Jim still has is the diamond assessment and the state aid, so those are all, and by the time we even go to town meeting, we won't have final state aid numbers, but we'll hopefully be, one step closer to have a more solid number. But yeah, those things are all up in the air, but at some point we have to with our best estimate.
Yeah, the
And final.
governor will file her, but the governor's gonna file her budget, I think by February, I believe it's the 10th or the 17th. So that will be filed. Obviously, we know that that's pie in the
Right.
sky, because then it's gonna go to committee and
Right.
But
Right.
I went to the MMA in Boston, and she was fully confident that state aid would be funded to its, chapter 70 would be funded, at least level funded, maybe a little bit more. And all the rest of it, they still haven't worked out. But she will, in a couple more weeks, they'll be filing their budget.
Okay, Buzzy has his hand up. Hey, Buzzy,
Buzzy.
how are you? There's Buzzy.
So Hugh may be right that we're going in circles toward the end of that discussion. But I think it was a wonderful discussion. And I think the challenge ought to be to build on that discussion in a way that does not go in circles. It's not a discussion that we haven't had in the past. We have made some experiments in the past with respect to trying to do some education before town meeting. Personally, I don't think that, for the most part, I'm talking about years ago, I'm not talking about what we did last year, that we didn't begin to do the kind of planning and education that we could do. I'd like to suggest that maybe at our next meeting, but although I realize the schools are up for discussion, the school budget at the next meeting, but if not the next meeting, the meeting after, we continue the discussion. And better yet, maybe we set up a subcommittee of the finance committee to look into what other towns do. I think that Lawrence might be very surprised to discover that there are towns that regularly do an excellent job of education. We could learn a lot from them. We could try to do our best this year to begin to match them in that effort. If we're talking about an override, and that means having a vote at the polls, we do have to worry a little bit about whether what we are doing crosses from education to advocacy. So we do want to stick with, as much as possible, educating. However, as far as town meeting is concerned, there's no reason why we can't advocate as well. So there's kind of a little bit of balancing we have to do here. But for town meeting, really, it is the finance committee that presents a budget. And there's nothing wrong with our advocating for the budget, as well as educating for the budget. So I'd like to make a motion that we set up a subcommittee that looks into what other towns have done, that begins now to plan doing the best we can do this year of educating both for town meeting and, to the extent that we're committed, if we are, to an override, educating for that override as well. So that's my motion.
Buzzy, I thought you did that last year. I remember it was something along those lines.
That I did that?
Yeah, I thought so.
Well,
And to other towns and so forth.
I'm happy to report on it again. Happy to do that. And I think all of us know there is a group that has been meeting that includes Cindy and myself, and did at one time include Karen, that should be coming out with an educational document next week. We'll see whether it does or not. It plans to present it to the select board for purposes of proposing to the select board that there in fact be an override warrant put on the town meeting, an item on the warrant. So I think things are moving toward an effort to educate, but I think that Lauren's proposal is a very good one, that we need to do more. So I'm happy to be part of such a committee. I'm happy to go back and get such information as I once presented and present more. But I like to see some young blood, which I can no longer claim to be, on this committee as well.
I second the motion.
Any other discussion? So Karen, is this something that we should vote on then, to have
Sure.
this subcommittee? I guess so. So we'll take a roll call. I'm just gonna go by how everyone's arrayed on the screen. So, Gary, what are your thoughts? You're on mute.
Yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Lawrence,
Yes.
you,
Yes,
Buzzy?
Well,
Well, maybe.
let me think about it. Yes.
And I will also vote yes, so that is carried unanimously. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6 of our 7 members present.
So now we need some people to be appointed. I wonder whether Lawrence would be interested.
Gee, I feel so put on the spot. In my big mouth. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I think it would be interesting to contact even the chairs of the finance committees of, some of the other surrounding small towns. You've got, Sonnet, Berkeley, Dayton. Some towns do have representative town meeting, like Dartmouth, for example, has representative town meeting. So you have to be a little bit more careful about that as to whether or not they still do regular open town meeting. But just even contacting the chairs of those finance committees might be insightful.
Yeah, I would even say in my opinion, a quicker path is if you go right to a town's website. Most towns have sections and they have all the materials right there. So you don't even need to find who the person is, get in touch with them, takes days to get in touch with them, like right on the town. And there's some smaller towns have pretty phenomenal websites with lots of information and you can get to it really quick. You can get to 4 or 5 and see the presentation materials and then, you know, have you in your brain, okay, I like this, I don't like this works, you know, and kind of get to something relatively easily. But I would
think it would be interesting to see how perhaps those finance committees, how effective they think any of that has been. I mean, do they find that that anybody pays any attention? I mean, because to me, that was the big issue for me. You put in a tremendous amount of work. A lot of people put in, you know, work in that. And I'm not sure, you know, if 10 people paid attention to it, 100 people, it's hard to gauge whether or not there's any value added. So that's, it may be there, but does anybody care?
I know, but you know,
If I ever asked myself that question, I would not have taught constitutional law.
Mhm.
you know, and the same thing right back, Cindy, right? If someone contacted me and said, hey, you produced this material last year,
Right,
how effective was it? I'd go, I don't know.
right,
Same
right.
thing, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know that
Yeah.
a chair is
Yeah,
going to
you're
have that answer either, you know? I
No,
mean, I don't have
they
the
probably have an
answer.
idea. They probably have an idea. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
as Cindy was saying earlier, you know, like I hear so many people say, "Oh, let's put something in Shorelines." Shorelines only has a 1,500 member
Yeah.
subscription,
Right,
Right,
you know, and
Yeah.
there's 16,000 people in this town.
right.
right.
I mean, I
Right.
know
And
those
you
are
can
the
bet that
1,500
I
that
would-
consistently turn out to the polls. So, you know, in that sense, that maybe that is the most effective avenue. But yeah, it's a good.
So just to say, we have time, but we don't have a tremendous amount of time. So
Right,
if we use our time to do research, then there's no time to actually to produce an educational document. So there's a balance, right, between if we're going to do it and we want to do it this year, then you've got to figure out a method that you can kind of get to your research relatively quickly and then move into a document, because creating the document takes some time. So we can't waste it all on researching and getting information that may or may not be helpful and doesn't serve us any value into getting to a document, right? So it doesn't need to be a perfect document. It needs to be something that we feel would be valuable, and then you can kind of fine tune it each year, you know, as things go along. So that's just my opinion on, you know, that's what happened with me last year. I needed to get something out, right? I don't know if I was too detailed, not detailed enough, you know, but I needed to get something on paper and then let it get evaluated, you know, and otherwise I would have been in paralysis for a long time with it. So that's just my, you know, my thinking on moving in a direction.
and I think this document from the other group will help as well.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of good information in that.
Great.
Do you want to call the question again?
Well, I just want to say, I don't want to be the skunk at the long party, as said, but I wish you well. I'm just skeptical. I think it's not education. I think it's politics. I think
Right.
that the school community is a strong voting bloc, which shows up en masse at town meeting when there is something of interest to the school. So we've all seen the voting bloc disappear after things of interest have been voted upon. So I think the education's fine. It won't do any good. People can exercise themselves and such, and that's fine, unless there is cooperation from their voting bloc. Simple
Yeah,
as that.
well,
How you market it, you.
right.
And we'll
I mean,
find out to some extent, maybe next week we do the school budget. The budget that I glanced at, I haven't had a chance to really look at it, shows a deficit of something over $1 million.
Right.
What are they going to say about that? I don't know, but I think
Right.
that's where we start from.
And
And
of course, the travesty would be at town meeting that if the school does get the support for additional funding, whether it be through override, which I would tend to doubt, but whether it's either override or use of free cash.
Yep.
And the rest of the town does not get that same share of the apple, travesty. I mean, that's just an absolute
That's what-
travesty.
I am afraid may happen, though. I hope it won't.
Yeah. Gary,
Yeah, so I go back to the comment that I made at the beginning. You know, if in fact the schools have this much, and we've seen it in the past, if they have this much sway at town meeting, why don't we work with the schools to have them also work with the town to fund an override? You know, if they have that ability, and we know that they have it because we built a brand new school, we've done all these things, you know, that are positive for the schools. Why can't we draw off that ability for the schools to also pass an override on the town side? And I talked about this a few years ago.
We
And-
tried to do
but
that
it
last
takes-
year.
But it takes the ability of the select board to want to sit down with the schools and the school committee to want to get this done. Because as far as I'm concerned, we don't we don't operating in silos here. This is one town, okay? And that's what really needs to be done. And if there's no ability at the top to do this, I go back to where we're spinning our wheels here.
Yeah,
And that-
well, and I think
I don't disagree with anything any of you saying. I am just pessimistic, given the history, that there'll be
Yeah.
a cooperation. And I hope I'm wrong. But remember, last year, we did the survey of the different departments that are what they needed for this and that. And the response from the schools was 3.5 million and 42 new positions, which was the end of the discussion. If they still have that approach, we're wasting our time. If you're right, Gary, and they can be converted to be cooperative with the town, then it's a new beginning. I'm just not confident that's what's going to happen. That's all.
Yeah, and you know, we had the budget advisory group at one time, and I know some people liked it and some people didn't, but I thought that there was some good conversations that were in that. There was select board meeting, there were members of the finance committee, there were members of the school committee, and even though we didn't vote, there was still a lot of good conversation that came out of that group, and it never really fizzled out. So, you know.
so.
Anything more on our agenda?
Can we move on? I'd like to jump in and talk about the school budget for a second, and then we can finish up the rest of the agenda. So, we all received today the school committee's approved budget that was, provided to us. So that's their, budget. So the fiscal 20, and I want to read these numbers so that we're cognizant of this. So the fiscal 24 budget that the school committee has provided to us, and they approved, I guess, in December, is 21,706,159. When you compare that against the fiscal 23 approved budget that was approved at town meeting, excluding the $300,000 in free cash that was a one-time use only to fund the budget, the 23 approved budget was 20,035,369. The difference between those two numbers of the school budget is $1,670,790, or an 8.3% increase is what the school is requesting. So we are far away from resolving where we're at. So the town administrator currently has a balanced budget, subject to, there's some things that are still pending, like we talked about, the diamond assessment and the state aid. But the town administrator has an approved budget using the formula that we use every year for the school, which is giving the school 54% of the new net revenue that comes in. So the town administrator's current budget for the school is $20,627,332. As compared again to the fiscal 24 school committee approved budget of $21,706,159. So we are currently off $1,078,827. So that's where we stand coming in for the school to come in next week. So what I'd like to know from you is there anything in particular that you would like to hear from the school? I don't want them to come in and just talk about a 21 million budget. I want to understand how are we going to, how are we going to get closer? What are they looking to do? And Buzzy and Cindy, you've been on as part of the fiscal group, and I was there back in May and June, and there were some great presentations that Mr. Albin presented to the committee for some of the state of the land of the school. And I think some of those presentations might be very helpful for the finance committee to hear, to see what challenges the school has and unfunded mandates and things going on. And I remember there was a particular presentation in the May-June timeframe that Mr. Albin presented. And there may have been others that have come since then, because I haven't participated in the meetings, but we need a presentation from the school, in my opinion, not just here's a $22 million budget. What questions do you have, finance committee? We need a presentation that they explain what their budget is, they explain the needs. And so I'd like to ask them for that for next week. And so if there's anything that you're looking for, please let's iron this out, and I'll send them an email tomorrow. I'm at the point almost, maybe we postpone the meeting next week if all we're going to have is a $22 million budget and we're $1 million off from the town administrator. I'm not really sure what value a meeting next week would have.
I agree.
What I was going to raise was, as part of that, Karen, is how would they plan to get to the budget of the money we have?
Right.
Layoffs, I presume, but how they must have thought about that. At least they should have thought about that, because the guidance hasn't been exactly a secret.
I think they've been very reluctant to publicly, I don't want to say announce, but publicly show what kinds of positions it would involve. I've heard 10, 12, 15 teachers, but I think that they are very reluctant to put that out there. To me, that would help their cause. I mean, to just say, this is what we want, this is what we need, rather than this is the amount of money available and this is what it's going to cost us as a result of that.
What
why
they're
don't
saying is trust us, and you can't do that. You're absolutely right. But
right?
they have to explain what the consequences are, as we've been saying to everybody else.
Right. So they need to bring in a budget that's balanced. And a balanced budget is the number that they were given. That's the amount of money available. This is not pie in the sky. I wish I had. That's all the money that's available to them. Any dollar that higher than that is taking away from some other department. So why don't they indicate what other department should not get the money?
Or they are
right.
sponsoring an override to fill it in.
Right.
You're absolutely right. That's the only other, it's a finite, as far as it right now, it's a finite budget for the town. The only way it gets expanded is for an override.
Right. You have to provide a source of funding. What's your source of funding for that additional $1 million+ dollars? Where's it coming from? Free cash? No, not free cash. You tell us some other number, some other place where it's coming from.
You tell us what your source is and we react to it.
Right.
If it's free cash,
So
then we
without discussing the school budget, without the school being here to represent. So
Right.
that wasn't my point, to try to talk about the school budget. My point was, they're in next week. And so we can either have a series of questions that we would like from them, or presentations, or if we feel that the gap is too great, should we be postponing the meeting until we have answers to whatever questions we are. So I wasn't trying to get involved in,
Okay.
talking about their budget without
Okay, sorry.
a representation of them being here. So just trying to gauge that.
My vote is it's useful to do an initial exploration. If we don't get very far, you may need to continue on a different date,
Okay.
because I don't think we get anywhere by just not talking about it for another week or two.
Okay.
I think Cindy's point is very good of how do you fund it? Where's the money come from?
Both
May I
of
say
those
that
had-
some of us will be talking to Tom Albin tomorrow morning. I don't think there's anything wrong with our having this discussion right now. I think it's been a valuable thing for us to express the concerns that we have. I think that Hugh's suggestion that we think about next week is possibly a preliminary discussion where we ask a lot of questions but don't get, in every case, the answers we're looking for, is a good idea. I'm going to feel free to mention tomorrow morning that we had this discussion tonight, and that unless the committee would prefer that the chair give Tom Albin a call and mention to him the kinds of questions that have come up. I think you're encouraging us also, Karen, to come up with more questions
Mm-hmm,
that we might send to you
mm-hmm.
tomorrow. Maybe you want to wait a little while until you get those before you contact Tom. But I want to say one other thing. I was a member of the original Budget Advisory Group. I thought it did a good job until one or two members decided that they thought it was, perhaps binging on what other groups in town, other institutions were supposed to be doing. But the point I want to make is that I think that these meetings we've been having every Wednesday morning with Tom Albin, with the town administrator, with Cindy and me, and with a number of citizens who are just interested but are not part of town government. I think it's functioned like the Budget Advisory Group in many ways. I think in particular, there's been a lot of cooperation among people who in the past felt were involved in open competition and unwilling to be open about weaknesses and needs and so forth. So I think a lot's been done. I'd be interested whether Cindy thinks the same thing.
Well, I think it has been a good learning curve for everyone to see the various points of view. Although I have to say, over the last probably month or two, Tom Albin has been very quiet about a lot of things, and he's played it very close to the vest as far as what their needs were. He's really been much more of a silent participant and has not really expressed his views about how detrimental this was going to be. I mean, he has said that, but never very specific about it. So I think he's played it very close to the vest the last couple of months, much more so than he was earlier. Whether that was by design or not, I certainly don't know. But we deserve a lot more information from them in that regard. But these meetings on Wednesdays have been helpful, although I am looking forward to taking a break from that for a while.
Thanks. So, some of the information that I'm going to request from the school is what we've asked every year in terms of, okay, we all know we need to close this gap. And so whether or not we meet in the middle or we meet with some amount of free cash or no amount of free cash, somehow the gap has to be lessened, and the gap has to be from the school side down, because the town doesn't have any other resources to cut further, really. And so there's not a lot that the town can cut to help eliminate that gap. So our request that we've done every year is to ask the school for, okay, if you had to cut, 300,000, 600,000, 900,000 in increments, what would you, how would it affect the budget and what would you do? And so, that should be, I'm surprised that information didn't come forth with this information, because it's a conversation we have every year, because this is not the first year that we've had a gap like this. And so I'm disappointed that we're not seeing the transparency of that. And so I'm going to request that from them. I don't know if we'll see it in the next week, but I have to believe they've been working on those sort of things. So it's them putting pen to paper and providing as an analysis. So I'm going to ask for that. But that's, I'm going to ask for that. So if anybody else has anything else that you want to know, we can go from there. But it's fine. We'll have our initial, having our initial meeting and kind of get a kickoff. But we're a long ways away with a million plus.
So Karen, what are you going to do? Are you going to give us time to send you to look over the budget and raise questions that we send to you tomorrow?
It's up to you. If you have specific questions on the line items of the budget, I would say that's probably fine for just raise them next week. They should be able to be prepared to respond to that. I was more looking at more higher level theoretical of how do we bridge this gap? What do we do? What are the funding sources that are going to do it? How what's going to, how is your budget going to be affected by X cut? I think that's the discussion to have. I don't think that the conversation next week is to say, oh, you've got X dollars on this line item for school supplies. Let's talk about that. I don't think that's where we're at next week.
Actually, I have a question for you. Are you on the CIPC, you Morton? Are you
On
on
what?
CIPC?
I
The
don't
capital-
say CPC. No,
Oh,
I'm on
CPC.
CPC.
Do we no longer have a representative, Karen, on CIPC?
I think
It's
that's
Gary.
Oh, Gary, are you on CIPC?
I am.
I don't know that we have.
I don't know
I
if
don't
they've
know
met.
if we have
They
any.
probably have met, but you know what it was? They were sending the email they were sending emails to my wrong account. So, I haven't met with them yet, but I don't know if they've really developed anything. I don't know if they have anything.
Well, the capital improvement should be finalizing their recommendation by
Right.
now.
Right, I think they
Who's on?
have.
I mean, I don't even know who's on. Is it Dick Brewer still?
Yeah.
Yeah, Dick Brewer's on there. Yeah.
Gary,
I'll
we
email
assigned that to you on a meeting that you were not present at our meeting.
Oh, okay. Really? Is that
I was just going to respond to talking about informal versus other. I think informal is fine. It can be franker, et cetera, for discussion rather than formal responses, et cetera. So I'm all in favor of having informal conversations tomorrow, if that's what you want, Buzzy.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
Well, I just had one comment. I don't, we were off a million something last year, and I think if I recall, we gave them some time to go back and look at the budget, and we had meetings, a few meetings back and forth. So I don't know if there'll be a value of having them in. So I mean, let's face it, it's a $20 million budget, and to go and start slashing here and there, it's going to take a lot of effort to go through that budget and make some pretty hard decisions on how to get back down to $1 million.
that's
You
what
know.
they should have been doing
Right.
all this
No,
time.
I agree. But what I'm saying is, will next week's meeting be any? I think what we should probably do is tell them, listen, we understand that there's a gap. We want you to work on that, and then we have you in maybe in a couple of weeks. But I think giving them what are we going to? I mean, in my opinion, what are we going to talk about next week? We're going to talk about there's $1 million gap. They're not going to have any solutions to that next week.
Gary, they should have some ideas. They've been working on this budget. They know there's a gap. They know it's going to be talked about. Maybe we'll get anywhere, but I don't see any reason to push it back. We start and we find out we don't get any answers. We'll recess and come back later, but that's better than not starting at all.
I agree.
I mean, that's, and that's, my request to them is our expectation is that we're going to want you to be discussing a budget reduction and what are the alternatives
Right.
the budget to that.
Yeah.
That's our expectation, to come in and discuss that.
Yeah.
And they've been through it before. I mean, this is not
Right.
exactly the first time it's ever come up.
Right.
Right, so we haven't had that, my point is, we haven't had that conversation with them yet. But we
Now we're
will,
gonna have it.
right, between now and when they come in,
No, next week, that's when the meeting, and they come in, we
Right.
talk about it.
Right.
I
And
agree.
I can contact Mr. Aubin tomorrow and have that conversation. And certainly Buzzy and Cindy, if you're seeing him tomorrow, you can, also, if you have an opportunity to talk with them, then it's whatever works. But I will be happy to call him tomorrow and just reiterate that that's what our expectation is, that's our conversation.
Sorry, Ken, they cannot have expected that they come in and we just say, oh, that's fine. We've got $1 million to spare. We'll give it to you. I mean, you have to be expecting this conversation.
Right. Right, I would think so.
oh, yeah, I'm not saying that they're not, it's just
Right.
that I'm not, well, let's see if they have anything prepared. I
Right.
don't know.
We'll find out.
Yeah.
Right. I have no doubt I have no doubt that they've been discussing it for a while. My expectation is that they share that with us as a presentation. So I have no doubt that they have been discussing it. But we need to see it.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, move on.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm gonna get silent again. Thank you.
Okay. So what do we have? The minutes? So we have minutes from January 24. Would anyone like to make a motion to approve the minutes of January 24?
So
So
moved.
move. Second.
Second. Okay, motion made and seconded. Any discussion about the minutes? No, we'll do roll call. Gary,
Yes,
Karen,
Yes.
Lawrence,
Yes.
you,
Aye.
and Buzzy.
Aye.
And I also approve the minutes, so that's carried unanimously. Any other liaison meetings? There was a very brief meeting of the long-term building committee last week. I was only able to be there for a short while because I had a conflicting meeting that night, but it was really to discuss putting the topic, if you will, on the warrant to open it up for discussion. So there will be an article drafted and we'll see that in what form it presents itself. It was a very, very, very rough, long diatribe of the explanation with a very short question before it. So that's to be continued. So we'll see where that goes. The audit committee has not met. We'll probably meet maybe in March. Other than that, I don't have any other committee meetings. Does anyone else have anything else?
Well, nothing pressing. The CPC can wait till next week to tell you what's going on. It's independent, so it doesn't really affect anything we do, but if people are interested, I'll report on that next month.
Okay, good. Any other items that anyone wanted to bring up? No, I think we're kind of talked out. 8:35 p.m. A motion to adjourn.
second,
Okay, we got a motion and a second. I have a feeling there's no discussion about that. Roll call. Gary,
yes.
Karen,
Yes.
Lawrence,
Aye.
you,
Aye.
Buzzy.
Aye.
Okay, and I vote aye as well. Well, good night, everyone. This is a good
Thank
good
you.
discussion tonight. We'll see you next week.
Great.